Please give a warm round of applause for Clare Mann.
Thank you very much, James, and thank you all our speakers here today. Who here would like to see a vegan world in their lifetime? Okay, who believes it is going to happen in our lifetime? Little bit of a less number, hey? Okay, now there's many reasons we are perhaps doubting that we won't see a vegan world, because as we look around, we're even told that although we have wonderful events like this, there is an increase in people eating animals, so we become despairing. Now, what I want to share with you today is that being hopeful and positive and what we think doesn't just make us feel warm and fuzzy. It is absolutely essential and accelerating and enacting a vegan world. Now, I'm clutching a piece of paper here because I want to share with you some really cool research that shows that thoughts are things. And so when I ask that question at the end, who here believes we'll see a vegan world in our lifetime, I'd like a lot more people putting our hand up. Okay? I believe we will see a vegan world in our lifetime. Okay? Now, why do I believe that? Firstly, I'm going to share some cool research about the things we need to do to facilitate it. But I honestly believe that most people aren't necessarily going to come to this through ethics or through consciousness. If we look around ourselves at the moment, most people follow. They're following a diet, a lifestyle, a desire for a big pile of money that one day they'll be free to do exactly what they want to do. Everybody is following. All we need to do is actually create an alternative for people. A lot of people will come to this through consciousness because of the ethics, and if it was the worst diet on earth, we would still have it, wouldn't we? Okay. But other people are going to come because that's the thing to do. Now, I want us all to just close our eyes for a moment, and I'm just going to do a little suggestion to you. Okay, close your eyes for a moment, and I want to imagine that you have stepped out into your garden, and there is a lemon tree there. And you put your hand out, and you pull forth a beautiful, ripe lemon. You take it back into the kitchen, you put it onto the wooden chopping board, and you slice it in half. And then you take another slice out of one of the halves. And so you're there with a beautiful round piece of lemon. It's so ripe, it's so organic that it actually, you can smell the beautiful juice. And I want you, with your eyes closed, to imagine bringing it up against your lips and running it across your teeth. Okay? And then you put your head back and you squeeze the lemon into your mouth. And I'm watching somebody's face here. Okay? And then you put that piece of lemon in there and you start chewing it. I wish people could see what I'm seeing because there's a lot of grimacing going on. Okay? Now open your eyes. Now maybe you were one of those people that as I was saying this, you were cringing. Because your body has a memory of what it's like to eat a lemon or to have something really sharp in your mouth. But there was no lemon present, was there? So the reality is, neuroscience tells us, is that our bodies have been taught to react to memories and thoughts and feelings and create the physiological conditions as if it's happening right now. Now, if that can happen randomly with lemons, let's have a look at some of the research to say, well, how powerful are thoughts and memories? There's some really cool research in the medical field. I don't know if we have any doctors or nurses here. And if I had my slides here, I could recall the actual research, but I'm happy to tell you what it is afterwards. There's experiments done to see the power of belief. Okay, there's some really interesting stuff in what we call epigenetics, which actually shows that the power of our belief in whether we are going to heal from illnesses is almost on a par with whether we have interventions. Placebos are as powerful, if not more powerful, than pharmaceutical medication when the person believes that is going to heal them. There was some research done with very large numbers of people looking at arthritis of the knees. And they divided these groups into 3 different groups. All of them had crippling arthritis and they needed surgery or they could not walk. The first group went into surgery. They put them under the anesthetic. They opened up the knee. They cleaned out the knee. They clanked with the instruments. They closed it up. They washed the knee. And the people in that group went on to have physiotherapy. The next group were taken into surgery. The knees were opened up. They didn't do anything with the knees. They clanked around with the instruments. They splashed the knee with water afterwards. And they did the physiotherapy. The third group, all of them believing, of course, that they're having knee surgery. The third group goes into the surgery. They lay them on the table, put them under anesthetic. They do absolutely nothing to the knees. They splash around with the water. They clank with the instruments. They had exactly the same conversations to control the experimental conditions as for the other ones. And afterwards, they did exactly the same course of physiotherapy. What do you think happened? There was no difference in the recovery rates of any of those different groups. The people who had had the actual physical surgery were as healthy and able to walk as those where the knees were never touched. That's pretty awesome, hey? Okay, now these are experimental conditions in hospitals. The fact that that could happen to one person would be impressive. But when we're talking about large numbers of people, it was the power of belief. Unfortunately, in war conditions, there are experiments done by psychologists who are a little less kind, certainly in the past when they've done them, where people will even die of conditions they believe they are suffering from, with symptoms consistent with that, like freezing to death or something, or bleeding to death, even though that's not happening. Now, just already, I hope I'm getting you to be hopeful. Because already, the power of belief, it can affect physical matter. Okay, so it can affect our own physical matter. Before I go on to share how could it affect wider matter, I encourage you to read a book by Dr. Bruce Lipton. He's a doctor in Auckland, and he was involved in the stem cell research. And again, he found when people believed that they were to be healed of certain conditions, and they had the power of belief in the doctor who said, of course you're going to recover. Those people went on to recover even though there were often not even interventions. So much so that Bruce Lipton had to leave that research. And he set up working with other doctors who had found very similar things. I encourage you to go and look at his videos on YouTube and read The Biology of Belief. There are doctors in there that deal with oncology patients, patients who have been told, you have 3 months to live, and tell them the type of cancer they have. 3 months later, those people die with symptoms consistent when either they didn't have the condition at all, or they should have died within days, and vice versa. People have gone to live for 12 months when the doctors look at the results and say this person should not be alive a week later. That book is full of experimental research that shows us when people believe in an outcome, physical matter can be affected in their own lives. Now that's pretty cool, hey? Because if we're so used to looking for actuarial sort of evidence, what's the likelihood, doctor, I'll be okay? What is the likelihood of people becoming vegan? And we're trying to push matter in many ways, and it's absolutely essential that we all take massive action. But this is something we can use to accelerate this vegan world. Anybody here ever done any transcendental meditation? Some people here, great. Anybody do meditation? I encourage you all to do it, okay? Because we often can teach ourselves emotionally what it is like to be in the state we wish to be, ultimately a vegan world. But there were studies done called the Maharishi studies. And you may have heard about them, where large groups of people, up to 10,000 people, in a certain area over a certain time, focus on peace in a certain area. And what they find, they set the experimental condition up where they have a control group, where people may just meditate generally, not necessarily for peace in a certain area. Or they just meditate and don't even know they're part of the studies. Again, they find that when people intentionally meditate on peace in a certain area, there is a massive reduction in violent crime, thefts, natural disasters. And when they stop doing that, it goes back to the same. Now, these aren't correlations, they're experimental conditions that have been controlled for. One of the most cool set of studies I've read recently is something called the Peaceful Cities Projects. Has anybody ever heard of that? The Peaceful Cities Projects have been conducted all over the world, where large groups of people, again, come to meditate. And they say, we're going to meditate for peace in East Adelaide, for instance. I don't know if they've done studies in Adelaide. They certainly have done them in New York and major cities in America. And again, they find up to, in one case, and I wish I had my slides here to show you, but I'm happy to show you it later, up to 25% reduction in violent crime in a very dangerous area over the period of time in which they were meditating for peace. When they stop meditating for peace, there is an increase. I don't know if it goes back to the normal level. Now, this is really interesting. Now, there are 16 peer-reviewed journal articles on the Peaceful Cities projects that talk about when we have a collective intention for a group outcome, we see measurable differences in outer reality. Now, just think a moment, how are you reacting to these stories? It goes against our own minds, doesn't it? How's that possible? We're not doing anything. Surely we have to tell people about veganism. Surely we have to get them to connect with the suffering of the animals and to ethically align with this. How is it possible through the power of intention that we might facilitate that? I have the great pleasure of talking to people all over the world about veganism. And my story first is, of course, as a psychologist, is ask them, how did you become vegan? And I'm absolutely amazed at the number of people that become vegan without even knowing what it is. Something happens to them. They may be a very big meat eater. They may rail against people that become vegetarian. And then one day their cat looks at them in the eye and refuses to look away. And they didn't see it before, but they suddenly say, there's a real person in there. And that gets them to start thinking about other animals. One of the most lovely stories I heard was a 10-year-old child in the middle of the south of America, in Texas, I believe it was, a huge state. And she was watching The Simpsons. And there was a case in there where a man brings in a dead reindeer to eat for dinner. And the mother of one of the girls who was vegetarian said, how can you do this? You know my daughter's vegetarian. And this young 10-year-old is watching this on the television. And she thought about it for a while, and then she went and sat in the garden. And she said, I looked at the stars, it was dark. She said, and I thought to myself after an hour, I wouldn't eat a reindeer, so why would I eat anything else? Nobody had ever talked to her. Nobody had ever mentioned the word vegan. But she knew she would do anything to not partake of the suffering. This is something we call the collective unconscious. And I think Andy Medic might have talked about it a little while back, or at least touched on it. That's why we're seeing this massive increase towards a tipping point of change. But if we want to accelerate it, we've got to align our inner and outer reality. Because if we're constantly angry with others, I think that's what he was talking about. We're angry with other people in different forms of activism. Or we're negative. Or, as Linda Stoner did a beautiful talk earlier, we rail against the slaughterhouse workers. Yes, there are some psychopaths, but they're not as far as many as working in these awful places where people are just trying to feed their families normally. But it's very important in terms of our thoughts is think about it. How often do we get angry? We've got a lot to be angry about, I know. So another piece of evidence, and I'd encourage you to read, is Lynn Taggart's work. Lynn Taggart did some research about, the New Age sort of things, as she called it. The more spiritual practices, where's the evidence sort of thing, although she was very open-minded, is for many of us who have partaken of those, sometimes we don't need evidence to know from science. We know it from our own experience, how things can change in our lives. She did a lot of research looking at correlations, so not cause and effect studies, to try and say, well, if people believe they're going to be healed, or they believe in an outcome of their lives to be successful or loving or overcome something, is it possible? And she did some really cool research around correlations, but then she decided, what about cause and effect? So again, she studied something which has been published in a book called The Power of Eight, where she talked about group intention in affecting outer physical reality. Again, she did studies. I don't know why they go up to 10,000. Maybe there's large numbers. And she actually got people to meditate. So to slow their brain waves down from the busy beta alpha waves in the brain to a more susceptible level, which is our alpha and theta. When our brain waves slow down, it's often where our inspiration comes up and our great ideas and creativity. And she did a lot of research that finding out that the minimum number of a group of intention of people to come together is actually 8 people. I encourage you to go and look at her stuff online, on her website, because she has got groups of people focusing on changing things like the physical properties of leaves on trees. When biologists take them outside and they actually examine them in controlled experiments, where leaves have actually changed their different chemical construction, it's absolutely extraordinary. And the ones that weren't focused on, to change the pH of water, to accelerate the healing in individuals, where the doctors have perhaps written them off. And then they see this, they go back to the doctor, and the doctor says, I don't know what's happened. But you've actually moved out of stage 4, and you're now in stage 2, for instance. I encourage you to go and read these. Because when we come together in groups, I'm going to say a minimum of 8, where we are focusing on a vegan world, and we're meditating, and we're getting into the embodiment of what that might be like. Because imagine today, you went home, and on the news, if anybody watches the news, and we hear the world has become vegan. Animals are liberated, and we're going to be living in a vegan world. Imagine how we would feel. We would feel ecstatic, wouldn't we? We can tap into that if we think about it for a moment. In fact, sometimes it's even hard to do that because the place beyond everybody stopping abusing animals is even more magnificent. But when we meditate on that and we get into that space, when we come to events like this, we experience it for several hours or several days. We feel great. If we can practice that, and I don't tell anybody to do anything I don't do. I regularly meditate daily, and I visualize a vegan world. And like many people here, I've been to the darkest places and I've seen the darkest things. But I also know that we can accelerate the enactment of a vegan world because whatever we focus on, we give energy to. So think about your specific intentions, how you can change by not gossiping, by not buying into any of the negativity. It's very easy when we are so pained about suffering to animals. So what I'd like to do, gentlemen, excuse me, hello. Could you just... Hi, guys. I'm finding it a bit hard to compete. Thank you. See, they're all so excited because they're about to get on the stage. Thank you. What I want to do is I'm going to do a little practical session, really. Anybody heard of the Heart Math Institute? Because this is going to help us get into the state at which we should be meditating. 20 years of research by the Heart Math Institute shows that when we bring resonance between our brain waves and our heart waves, it brings us to a state of calm where we can have an increase in calm, in focus, reduction in anxiety, and depression. Okay? Think of anxiety. It's a fear of the future, really. And depression is the concerns of the past. When we bring our heart and our head into resonance, i.e. the waves, instead of being out of sync with each other, start to align, we not only feel better, we are preparing ourselves to get into a state of positive visualization. So what I'm going to do is we're going to do a quick experiment here. Well, not an experiment, a practical. Just become aware of your breathing at the moment. This is something I teach people with quite chronic anxiety. It's probably quite shallow, your breathing. Because unless you do yoga or meditation, we are not used to doing this. So just deepen the breath a little bit more. And I want you to breathe into the count of 4, out through the mouth to the count of 4. Breathing in, 1, 2, 3, 4, out like a waterfall, 5, 6, 7, 8. In, 1, 2, 3, 4, out through the mouth, 5, 6, 7, 8. Just continue that for a moment. And then I want you to imagine you're breathing up through the left-hand side of your body, which is where the heart is. So it comes up and it goes through the heart, up to the head. And then you breathe out down through the heart. So you're breathing in, up through the left, breathing down through the left, through the heart. Just trace that in your mind's eye, breathing in and breathing out. Breathing in, breathing out through the heart, in through the heart, out through the heart. And as you're doing that, I want you to bring into your awareness something you're really grateful for. What are you grateful for what's happened today? We've got a lot to be grateful for being here. Being amongst like-minded people, being reminded of a vegan world that is not only coming, but is already here. The fact you had breakfast, you're going to have chocolate brownies later, dogs are running around, young children. Had some great music earlier, wanted to make us dance. What are you grateful for? And then continue to breathe in and out of the left-hand side of by your heart. And to see your heart expand and get into that place. And in the same way, we can visualize the lemon and have a reaction. Imagine what it would be like if you regularly practice this. And then you started to be really grateful for a vegan world. 2019 has been labeled the year of the vegan. A vegan world is certainly coming. How do people feel doing that? I promise you, if I was to wire you up, there would be greater resonance between your heart waves and your brain waves. And that leads to reductions in anxiety. It makes us present. Because when we feel overwhelmed, and it's all too much, we're not present. So a simple thing, when you feel overwhelmed or you feel negative or you see something about the horse racing, I want you just to do this experiment. Very simple. It's an immediate one that we can actually do. And so go on to the Heart Math Institute. Go and have a look at some of their experiments. You can even buy a little biofeedback machine that I use with people, which immediately gives you feedback through the color of the little machine changing when you come into resonance. Okay, there's lots of really cool things we can actually be doing. So I've just been told I've only got 10 minutes left. I thought it had gone already, but so I just wanted to think about what I've actually shared with you there. A vegan world is already here today, isn't it? There's a lot of evidence that suggests that thoughts are things. But what can we do on a regular basis? I want you to become really aware of your self-talk. You know, what goes through your head? How are you like online? What's your reaction when you see any vegan infighting? I'm going to be doing a panel at 3:30 talking about this very issue and some of the really important roles we must collectively take as activists to usher in this world. And that's not because I've just come up with them. It's based on the research out of the civil rights movement and work from Martin Luther King to show collectively what we must do and what we mustn't do. Because when we feel hopeful, we are almost electric. We give energy to other people. But also energy, things come out of where we put energy. So I want you to check out some of those resources. And I want you to feel inspired and to play your part as part of the solution. There are very many different types of activism, from making cupcakes to doing potlucks, to going into the slaughterhouse, to making documentaries, to Anonymous for the Voiceless, of which I am a member and I have great respect for, is whatever your form of activism, it's very important that the minimum we do is not to criticize others, because we think this is a preferable way to do something. Okay? Number one, we know that thoughts are things. They affect our physical matter. They affect the intention of the overall intention of a vegan world. We may not like Meat-Free Monday. We may be tempted to say, it's okay not to do cruelty on Mondays. Of course, for the ethical vegan, we can't be a little bit pregnant. However, the minimum we must do is not criticize the Meat-Free Monday. We must celebrate the outcome of what the collective is trying to achieve. And so I'm going to finish in a moment, but let me just ask you, are there any more people? When I ask you the question, who here believes in a vegan world? Do we have a little bit more hope after what I've shared with you? Who believes it's going to happen? I don't think it's being Pollyanna or naive. We have a part to play. In quantum science is now catching up with, or science is catching up with quantum science and what used to be called New Age. Thoughts are things. To yourself, to the vegan world, be mindful of what you think, what you talk to others about, and what you get involved in. Because ultimately, the energy that resonates in that positive way is the thing that's going to facilitate this and accelerate it even further. So I'm going to say thank you, and I'm going to see if there's any questions. So thank you from me, and any questions? No questions? Speechless. You've been doing the energetic work, which is wonderful. James, have we got any questions? Where's the man of the moment? I can keep talking if you like. Yes. What I will get you to do, if you like, I'd have lots of resources, a lot of free programs on veganpsychologist.com. There's a really cool one at the moment, veganpsychologist.com/myths, unquestioned assumptions behind the non-vegans' resistance as to why they won't become vegan. There's free little mini course there of 4 videos, interactive, and that could help you even further to use some of the languaging and the power of intention to actually usher in this vegan world. So I'm having great fun up here, but I'm kind of running out of things to say, and there is the man of the moment. Thank you very much indeed.